Welcome back to Voices of Impact, the space where we explore leadership beyond titles, hype, and hustle, and into clarity, embodiment, and human impact. So today's episode is for leaders, builders, and thinkers navigating the fast-moving world of AI while asking a deeper question. So how do we stay human as we build the future? Right, so I'm so excited to welcome Vaish for a thoughtful, grounded, and deeply insightful conversation on embodied leadership in the age of AI. So she's a veteran of McKinsey, Box, and Adobe, and someone who believes the most important technology is the kind that makes us more human, right? A strategist by training and a tinkerer by nature, she brings a rare multidimensional lens to leadership, so spanning business, product, AI, startups, and investing, which is a great range, shaped by a foundation in humanities and psychology. And what sets her apart isn't just where she's worked, it's how she sees everything, right? The world, how she approaches every technical challenge through a humanitarian embodied lens, right? So grounded in empathy, curiosity, and lived experience. She's also a passionate advocate for women in tech, just like me, community building and supporting builders who are solving meaningful problems with both rigor and heart. So in this conversation, we explore leadership through stories, so not just like sound bites, but we really talk about the uncertainties and AI as augmentation, so we're not replacing any of this, and what it really takes to lead with clarity and conviction, right? So Vaish, welcome to Voices of Impact. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Veena. Thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm so excited for this conversation.
So your path spans humanities, consulting, product, investing, which is so great. That's really inspiring. And how did each phase shape how you see the world and make decisions today?
Yeah, I've taken a rather unconventional path towards being where I am today. And a lot of it comes from, honestly, great mentors and people who have helped me, supported me, and advised me along the way. So thank you to who is listening. I think each phase offered something different for me, but the connecting thread across a lot of this is I've always been the person who thinks about the problem slightly differently because I come from a different background than sort of most of the folks on the call. So for instance, this starts with my very, very first job actually out of undergrad, where I was in tax consulting in India. And usually that's a profession that's dominated by chartered accountants, like accountants by training. And I came from an economics background, which means I thought about economic principles a lot more than sort of like pure numbers, right? So I would think about things from a deeply first principles perspective of like, okay, if we have to talk about revenue like this, then what are the levers under it? How do we map those levers? Like, not to get too technical, but essentially slightly wearing a slightly different hat and coming at it from a different problem while still trying to understand things from an accounting perspective, right? Like that, you can't give up that portion of the job. So that's been sort of the connecting thread. That's an example. Even today in my current role at Adobe, I come from a lens of like, I want to get deeply technical about what AI is, what is possible, equally about what is not possible, because there are a lot of narratives out there in the world that kind of say that AI is the panacea for everything. And the technology is still early. There's a lot of things that we're still solving, we're still researching, and we're still working on. So how do you balance that narrative by being deeply technical, but you would not expect somebody from a business school to say something like that, right? But I believe that you have to bring those balance of perspectives in order to make an informed choice. And the last thing I'll say, Veena, is I'm a big proponent of cross-functional teams and cross-disciplinary teams, because when you have people coming at a problem from very diverse perspectives, you're more generative, you figure out more ideas, and you test a lot more things before you shut things down and say this is the only way to go, right? Like,
right.
It's just much more additive in my mind.
Yeah, that's great. I just love how like we're so similar in many ways because I also come from a very unconventional background. When you do like, I also have that econ background as well, and looking at it from a very data tech perspective, and like you said, balancing the human piece, right, is a challenge for many leaders these days. Important. So I just love the lens that you see it in different things. So amazing job over there. So yeah, what lessons have you internalized from working across diverse cultures, industries, and types of teams? So just going more deeper into those questions.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I think the primary lesson I've learned is that people are assets, right? Like, I think having been in the technology industry for 12 years now, I feel like a lot of leaders and a lot of companies just think about humans as like resources in a chart, like an org chart or an Excel sheet. And sometimes I wonder why that's the way, that's the perspective. I think I've seen cultures win because they are so focused on putting humans at the center. Yeah. They invest in their talent pool. They reward the talent pool in the right way. And I don't think that's going to change with AI. I think this narrative that we're seeing in the market around your 10x engineers are going to get 100x are going to be absolutely true. So how are you going to attract those 10x people? How are you going to turn them into the 100x? You can't just give them a tool and be like, okay, great, right? Like the thing that I've learned time and again is hiring rock stars is not enough. Like you have to keep them motivated. You have to keep them incentivized. You have to provide the right environment for them, the right colleagues, the right culture. Every single one of those things is multiplicative, not even additive in my books. And every time I have thought about how I build teams, I put people at the very center of it. So very good example is my current product team at Adobe. We're a small team, but we're a very mighty team. We run a big book of business for the AI native products at Adobe. And the way I build my team is I'm very empowering. Like I do not go and micromanage. I know there's founder mode and all those conversations going on. But I am a little bit of the Tina Fey school of philosophy, which is like hire really good people, create the conditions for them to thrive, and then they will figure it out. And if you can provide three things as a leader, this is how I think about it, 3 C's, right? Like one is what I call context, which is you provide clarity and context around what is the strategic direction, how are you going about like moving we are all rowing our boats in a single direction that feels like we're contributing to the company's goals. So those kinds of strategic directions and context and clarity is really important so that everybody feels like they're rowing in the right direction and they're contributing to the company going in the right direction. The second C that I focus a lot on is around coaching, right? I think it's the most underinvested part of leadership and management in my books because everybody's busy, everybody's running poll to post. And right now in the AI space, it feels like I call it the space race, right? It feels like everybody is just like, it's massive amount of shipping velocity. It's a massive amount of change every day. How do you guide your team through all this? How do you share the right narratives? How do you put things in perspective? How do you help them grow into those 10x and 100x people? Like, how do you give feedback in a helpful and encouraging way? All of these things matter. And I think a lot of that coaching skill set for me comes from my McKinsey days, because you asked me about how every phase contributes to my thinking today. McKinsey has this value that says clients first, and you can only be client first if you have the right team. Right. And the right team involves providing feedback. Feedback is a gift. How do you coach teams? How do you grow them? And those kind of cultures that have rewarded people significantly have created many leaders. So clearly that playbook actually works when you invest in people. And for me, that makes me believe foundationally in coaching compared to sort of managing people the way I think a lot of folks think about it. The last C I will say is around collaboration, right? So this is, as a leader, am I collaborating with my peers? Am I role modeling the right kind of collaboration? But am I also removing roadblocks for you? Like if you come and tell me there's this other team that is not putting what we need as a priority, then I need to go understand what might be going on, diagnose, build the relationship, build the bridge, build that collaborative sort of like partnership with them. So those are the 3 C's I've always found helpful, which is context and clarity, coaching, collaboration. I think if you get these 3 C's right, as a manager and leader, a lot of your team will be able to step up and play their role. A big part of it is hiring people who are aligned with this kind of philosophy, right? So that is a big part of how I try and recruit people, is like I definitely look for technical and hard skills, but also people who match this philosophy of like, if you trust in me, I will step up and deliver and ask for help as needed. So those are some of the ways that I've started thinking about how do you build teams in this era.
Amazing. I love the 3 C's and absolutely aligned to, yes, coaching. Clarity is number one. It's really the foundational piece, like you said, because I think tech gets you into the role and the job, but then after that, like a lot of people are struggling is, hey, how do I navigate this, right? The first 90 days, or how do I excel in this role? How do I get the promotion? And I know a lot of us in the corporate who are listening, maybe we don't have those mentors. So I can see how you're such a great mentor of really articulating those 3 C's for everyone very clear and concisely. So I love that. And as a coach, I can totally relate. I think the best thing as a leader, as a coach myself, is really seeing the potential in others.
100%.
And I think it's like, yes, there are blind spots, but blind spots in a way that like, hey, this is where you are, but you're meant to be a leader, right? That, you have so much potential, but what are the bottlenecks? What's stopping you from getting there? Kind of seeing as a mentor and a coach how we can push that further, but in a very empathetic way, right? So,
Can I add a couple of things to what you said? So much resonates for me. One thing is when I was in McKinsey, we used to have this framework called strengths-based feedback, which I find to be so powerful because usually feedback is delivered in sort of what we call the shit sandwich. I don't know if you need to censor for censor the word out, but it's kind of like you start with good feedback, you add the like things that they're not good at, and then you add again like, oh, but you can recover. Like that is not a great way.
right.
I've felt like everybody's like when you have that kind of a culture, I feel like everybody's just bracing for the middle layer where it's like uncomfortable. Versus the way I've thought about providing coaching and feedback is I mostly hire ambitious people. I think every one of us in tech and all of these industries, we're all ambitious for ourselves. It might be in slightly different ways. How we express it might be different. But I take your goals and your ambitions as the anchor and say, what does it take for you to hit that goal or that ambition? Oh, I want to become a staff PM. I'm a senior PM today. Then for 2 years, the feedback I'm giving you is not about you just doing your job today, but saying, this will take you to the next level. And that feels like a much easier conversation for me to have than to give them this is what you're good at, this is what you're bad at. Like, that's not helpful usually. It's couching that in the context of like, as a staff PM, you have to influence not only your product's roadmap, but other teams' roadmap. And then I need you to think more strategically about what is changing in the market. So can you bring some more of that lens if they're not doing it already? Or even turning that into a strength and saying, hey, there is this thing that you have to do as a staff PM. Today, like you have to work on using your skill set in sort of being able to talk to other people because you can do market research by talking to people, or you can read documents, or you can there are multiple levers usually to get to these kinds of things.
Right.
Whatever feels the most natural to you, let's use that strength and that power to essentially address what it takes to get to that next level. I have found that to be powerful even when I receive feedback, let alone me giving feedback or giving coaching to people that I work with.
Yeah, I love that. And likewise, like I think but you hit a nail on the right thing. And I feel like it's really what your zone of genius, right? So you have to understand what that person's strength is and play to that. Like, not everyone's gonna have the same thing, different PMs, but I think what really is important as a coach, and this is my strength as well, is really understanding the unique value you bring to the table. And a lot of people think unique value is just like technical experience, but it's really your lessons, your stories that shape the person who you are today, your identity. What is that? What were you before? What are you now? Why, right? It's also the why behind it. When it comes to the zone of genius and play with that. So for example, like you and I maybe have that connection piece. If you're a good collaborator, if you're good at empathy, like really play to that strength and not let that stop you. So it's different for each person, but absolutely love this conversation already. It's just very insightful. So can you share a moment, and I just want to go into more of the strengths piece that a lot of people don't much talk about, especially as women, on the female executives, but can you share a moment you had to deeply trust your intuition or embodied judgment to make a critical decision rather than like data or numbers or facts?
Quite a few times. I'm trying to think of which is the most suitable here. I was narrating the story to someone recently when I was in consulting a long time back, and this was a growth moment for me, which is why it's so top of mind. Without revealing the client, this was a very, very senior client. The CEO was in the room. The team and I had worked for like a few weeks, and we had built a deck that had a particular recommendation, and we had an expert come in and sort of question us and challenge us in front of the CEO, right? Like the entire team was turning and looking at me. I was the like manager sort of leading the project, and there's this person who's also senior to me and is like telling us that there is a different direction in place. And I definitely had to sort of go back to my gut instincts of like, my team is looking at me. I have to set the right tone. I cannot obviously negate the expert in the room either. So I used whiteboarding as a way to like just say, okay, let's state our assumptions. Let's state your assumptions. Let's like sort of figure out how we walk through this and so on and so forth. And very gently guided that approach. Imagine you're like sitting with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar like public company, right? going to the whiteboard feels like the wrong instinct, right? Like you are formal, everybody's suited up, like it just felt like the wrong instinct. But this is again where I'm really grateful for sort of growing up in the McKinsey culture, where it's just about being fearless and bold and doing the right thing, right? And it's about putting the client interest first. So we did that, and it felt very collaborative, because once you start whiteboarding and you're saying, let's throw all the assumptions out the window and state them as we need, and let's go through it and see where do we have common ground, where do we diverge, and how do we navigate this. It turns out at the end of it, we came to a better answer, right? Nice. Because it was not exactly A, it was not exactly B, it was closer to A, which I felt good about, but it also felt like we brought the expert through the process and they were on board as well, and they added some nuances that we had not considered because it was in the middle of the engagement, right? So it's really helpful to sometimes trust your instinct to do something that feels maybe different from what most people would resort to. So that's a really good example of me saying, I need to trust my gut instinct to do the right thing for the customer. That's why values really matter. Trusting the gut instinct and saying, I want to do what is right by the client. And the values really matter, which is why company values exist. They ground you in prioritization. They ground you in moments like that put you to the test. And the second thing is you have to think about how you're role modeling some of these behaviors for people around you. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of times I have Zoom screenshots from every job where I'm literally the only woman in that meeting. And these are critical meetings. We're making M&A decisions. We're making strategic choices. We're discussing portfolio allocations for resources. So many of these rooms, I'm the only woman. When I was younger, I used to take pride in the fact that I was the only woman in the room. Yeah. I'm starting to get to a place in my life where I'm like, I don't want to be the only woman in the room. Right. I want more women in the room. I want people with diverse perspectives in the room. I want people with humanities engaging in AI and talking about safety risks and things like that as well, right? Like we need to have broader lenses so that we're all bringing the best of our thinking to the table. And similar to that whiteboarding situation, we actually end up in a better place because we've had the right conversation, the right collaboration pattern. And honestly, it takes us closer to what makes sense for most of us in the room, right? If not all of us. So those are a lot of moments like that through consulting, a lot of moments through that even later in my sort of life as an operator. Even in investing, I've made some very non-traditional bets, like coming from a B2B perspective. Most people are like, oh, you only invest in AI, oh, you only invest in this. I've invested in like deep tech, which most people would think I don't know much about, but I actually deeply study some of these markets behind the scenes. I've invested in gaming companies because I grew up a gamer, which most people do not know about. So those kinds of things, like everybody has such a unique story, and most of us are multifaceted and bring a lot of diverse thinking to the table. If you create environments where people can sort of take those decisions or take those moments to like think differently, I think it is such a powerful experience. And I think a lot of that comes down to trusting your gut and being fearless.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love this. I just love absolutely. I mean, I think you're inspiring everyone, including me who's listening to this, how fearless you've been, because especially in corporate, it's not easy, especially being the only woman in the room and challenging the status quo. So kudos to you on that. And that's where an intuition's powerful, right? And especially for a female, that men don't, right? And I want to say this out loud, that even though it's a male-dominant industry, sometimes our intuition is so powerful, and I don't want people to neglect that. And kudos to you for the whiteboarding. I totally relate. My mentor told me about the whiteboarding. So, thank you. And like you said, I love how you talked about being a role model for the others, like modeling the behaviors, because there are leaders that say that, but they don't walk the talk. Right. And you're a perfect example of how you walk the talk with your learning your examples from McKinsey. So this is all great stuff. So thank you so much for sharing that moment and stories. I'm pretty sure it's inspiring to everyone who's listening. So yeah, like I know there's another question that's here that I want to ask. How do you approach uncertainty when the right answer isn't obvious?
It's a great question. In an interesting way, actually rely on gathering as much information as I can. That's usually my first instinct. And usually for me, that involves two things. It's me doing a little bit of reading up on my own and building my intuition, especially if it's a problem I'm encountering for the first time. I've never faced it before, and the ambiguity is really broad. The second thing that I do is I actually go talk to a lot of people. I talk to people, I pick up the phone and say, hey, this is not something I understand. So very good example is I was a founder before I came to Adobe, right? And I was working on problems that I do not understand deeply sometimes, right? Like AI is still new, we're all still learning. I would pick up the phone and call 2, 3 people and say, hey, can you teach me about this thing that I'm working on? And I have found that to be more helpful than not, because when you read, you choose what to read. When you talk to people and just share your problem, they give you a wider perspective and they may guide you in directions you didn't even think about. And I really enjoy that process. And I think being a founder forced me to do a lot more of it.
Exactly.
It's really uncomfortable to cold outreach. It's really uncomfortable to like
Right.
ping people you do not know. And I think I've met a lot of people along the way who've sort of helped me navigate new seas, because either they're experts or just talking to someone helps you think about things differently because somebody else sees it a different way. I've really appreciated that sort of like basic fact gathering and information. The second thing is I come back to this constantly, which is like the concept of culture and values, right? Like, how do you stay anchored in what are your belief systems? And also thinking about those critically. Like, it's not just saying, oh, this is what the company is saying, these are the values, like, let's just make decisions that way. But like, critically, how have you assimilated that value, right? Like, today at Adobe, we have a value called be an owner, which means I have to own that decision. Tomorrow, if there's an issue with that decision, I have to own the consequences of that decision. I have to think about how do I turn things around if anything goes wrong. Like, you have to think through some of those things. The last thing is I'm just a very deep thinker. Like,
Yeah.
in the founder land, this is called like an idea maze or something like that. I typically like to go and say, hey, what are the different scenarios that might play out? How will I react in each of these scenarios? How do I respond in some of these scenarios? How will other stakeholders respond in these scenarios? And how do you bake that into your thinking? It used to be much harder because I used to just sit and do this on pen and paper before. But now, interestingly, like with all these AI tools, which is why I think they're kind of really helpful in terms of like augmenting how you think. I would pick like all the three like big LLM providers, give each of them a personality or a stakeholder thing and say, okay, if I think about things like this, like how would you react? How would you respond? Like, what would your agenda be? Then what is happening is you're simulating sort of the real world in some ways, and then you're able to come up with a better option as the first draft. I'm not saying it's the final one. You still have to react and respond with the real world, interact with them and understand how things will play out. But it gets you a little further along in terms of thinking. That's actually, it's probably the most common way that I use AI, which is to say, hey, can I understand multiple people's perspectives on a topic? And how do I bake that into a proposal that I'm putting forward, or a particular change in strategy that we're thinking about? Or how do I give feedback in a way, right? Like, I know this person's personality and some of the context that they've been through. How will they react, and how do I deliver that feedback differently? That's kind of how I used AI in the most common way.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's all about like refining, and yeah, you kind of sometimes I know people are kind of stuck like, oh, I didn't get the, job done or the goal, we didn't reach that result, but everything is a trial and error, right? And
100%.
as founders, as an entrepreneur, we've learned the hard way. That's what true success is. It's not linear. Sometimes you need to kind of fail, get back up, see what's working, what's not working. Every day of my life I do this. Yes, it's challenging, but it's also fun. And like you said, I love networking, and I do want to like talk about this a bit because I know executives, especially in corporate, struggle with networking and like, should I reach out to this person? How do I get seen by C-suite? But in reality, networking, it doesn't have to be like really nerve-wracking or anything like that. It's really about authentically putting yourself out there and just learning from others, right? You're just getting to know someone as just a normal human being and learning about their story and perspectives. That's how I also, I just really enjoyed the process. So when you look at it from a growth perspective, you're also learning and growing. It's easier to network and put yourself out there, and that's where clarity comes from. Because clarity sometimes, I've talked to people even recently that it tends to go into overthinking mode. But sometimes in clarity, you're only going to clarity when you actually take action. So just talking to one person a week, doing a coffee chat with someone that you enjoy in your workplace, or it could be anyone. It has changed my life in so many ways. Like, look at us now, even on the podcast, there are a lot of them I don't know, but we're already friends within 2 weeks. So it's just like how you see for things from a different perspective. So I absolutely agree. And that's how you gain the clarity, gain information, right? So people tend to just sit back on paper and pen, but reality, put yourself out there, that's very important. So no, thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. So going for emerging leaders, I know how such an amazing mentor you are, but Are there any beliefs, habits, or narratives you see leaders needing to release to fully step into making that impact they deserve?
It's a great question. And I want to go back to what you said about networking, right? So I will confess that I'm a bit of an introvert.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that you have to be an extrovert in order to succeed. And I think that's a narrative that I think I'm going to have a narrative violation and say that's not true.
Yeah, like
I think primarily because I think introverts are deep thinkers. And I think, again, the strengths-based thing kicks in for me. Then how do you network actually changes a lot. I do not go to like big events where I don't know anyone. Like those are not places where I thrive. I'm sure there are other people who are very good at doing something like that. I typically go through adjacent circles, right? So I have affiliation networks where I've worked at certain companies, I've gone to certain schools, I've done a few activities in my life. So I need to share something in common so that there's a good, healthy conversation that happens. Because the thing that I find the most challenging is like small talk. Like
right.
where it's very
Likewise.
surface level and it's very like, so what did you do? Where did you go for a break? Like that's interesting. It gets you like through the first 2-3 minutes of warm up. But I need to share something with you in common for me to go deeper. Like this conversation is a really good example, right? Like you and I obviously share beliefs on what is coaching, what does leadership mean,
Right.
how should we think about people in the context of everything that's happening in the AI world. And that leads to an interesting conversation. Like we're having fun, we're jiving, we're
Right.
thinking about it and we're reflecting deep. But if you throw me into an environment where I don't know the other person, where I don't know what we share with the other person, then conversations stay somewhat surface level, and I look for deep meaningful conversations. That's how I build relationship. It's a strength of mine, and I've stuck to my guts on that. I think that's an answer for both how I approach networking, like you were talking about earlier, where we can go really deep, we can talk about problems, we can talk about how things work, but it also extends to the point of like it's also easier to be vulnerable when you're in places like that, because when you share things in common, you also share issues in common, problems in common. And a lot of what ends up becoming true as you grow, sort of senior in the industry is a lot more problems don't have solutions. There's a lot more stuff that is, to your point earlier, like uncertain and ambiguous. Okay, what job skills do we need 10 years from now because of AI? Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, I can stay grounded in what I know today, and this is how I'm directing my team. How are you directing your team? So this is how I'm thinking about. That's interesting. Now we share notes. Like I was in a product forum that AWS brought together about, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago. And it was a wonderful, wonderful conversation because all of us just like lost our titles, lost our context, and we were all just coming together as people who are like, we're all trying to figure this out. What is working? What's not working? Oh my God, this problem, I didn't even think about it. Oh wow, you guys are doing that? That's super interesting. I want to go try that in my team. Right? Then it's an exchange of ideas, it's an exchange of vulnerabilities. You don't feel alone. Like they say, right? Leadership is lonely. Like the more you get closer to the top, it does get harder to be vulnerable. And I've seen phenomenal leaders that I've worked for form those kind of like small affinity groups. Shout out to Aaron, who does a lot of this with other CEOs, right? Like you need that group so that you can share. Like nobody understands your problem unless they're in a similar situation sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need that peer group, you need that group. And I am so grateful for my peers who've shared these kinds of things with it. There are people I catch up with on a regular basis to sort of exchange notes. And I've got some of my best ideas from those conversations. And for me, the biggest narrative violation that I think a lot of, the biggest narrative violation in general, but I think is the right thing to do is like, don't pretend like you know everything. Like there's a lot of stuff like a lot of us don't know. And I know everybody says this in terms of saying, I don't know. Is a great thing for a leader to say. It's still hard. It's incredibly hard because people around you look up to you and think you have answers. And there are times where I've told the team, right, like this is new. Let's all figure this out together. Let's put our heads together. And I think I really appreciated what you said earlier before, which is a lot of this is iterative. Let's go try something. It'll fail. We'll come back. We'll learn. We'll iterate on it, right? And I think there's this natural human instinct that to want things to be right on the first try. It's perfect if you type the perfect prompt and GPT gives you the first best answer, right? Like, no, it doesn't work like that. Right? You have to have that conversation, which is why it's so beautiful that even technology is starting to mimic sort of how we think and we operate as humans, which is very conversational. And I really deeply appreciate that more conversations without pretense and more deep conversations actually get you to a much better place than sort of, anything else.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I love how you just really emphasize values a lot, because beliefs, values, And then you also like challenge the narratives and the myths, right? So absolutely to the introvert, I was introvert like before, and now I'm an ambivert, and I also take pride in that because there's so much depth that you and I both have that others don't. So I know people are like, I can't network because I'm not an, extrovert, but that's not true, right? You need to play to your strengths. As mentioned, so really know yourself and be self-aware. I think this also goes into emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Taking the time to slow down for all the leaders who are listening and just really get to know your strengths, who you are, what your stories are. It's not about, experience only, what you do. That's of course going to be very helpful, but it's really who you are. Like, I said, if you didn't have the titles, who are you today? But at the end of the day, you kind of come through together as a collaborative, and we're like, hey, we can do this. We can figure it out. And I love that attitude that you have. Because I think leaders, especially, we tend to always do everything by ourselves. As mentioned, like, it's a lonely journey. I've been there. I always was. I'm going to be vulnerable here, but I've always been the person who's like, I don't need help. I don't want to receive. But now I realize, like, we need to get real with ourselves and be honest. Like, we do need help. We all struggle. It's okay. It's okay to, say that, right? So, especially for women, and, find your peers, find your mentors, find your community. And community is something that we all need to prioritize, right? So, like you said, release. I know this is something I talked about in another one, but we have to release that ego, like check it out the door when it comes to any kind of connections and relationships, and like support each other as much as possible. So I would definitely look into that for the next leaders. These are things that it's just a huge role model. We all learn from each other. So these are just habits that we need to keep on a consistent basis. We need to understand, like, what are we doing, what are we not doing, how do we change our habits to become the leader that we're meant to be. So absolutely, this is awesome conversation. And for you especially, how do you see your journey shaping the next chapter of your work? Like, what's next for you?
It's a great question. I'm definitely thinking about that deeply. I think for me, I feel like we're all living through an inflection phase, not an inflection point, because of all the technology that's going out in the world. I think for me, there are a couple of things that I'm thinking a lot about, which is one, truly, how do I become a builder again? It's been fun being in the big tech space. And, even within Adobe, I would consider myself more of a builder. I write code. I like talking to customers. Like, these are things that I try and do as much as I can. And I would like to go even deeper into that journey, which means, can I take on more scope in terms of being a builder and so on and so forth. The second thing is I want to expand my purview beyond sort of, like you mentioned, I already have a day job, I already do investing, there are a bunch of things, but I'm definitely getting to a place, and I was sharing something with someone like a month ago, getting to the place where I'm starting to think about a dual purpose mission, like a purpose plus profit kind of mission, where it's, if you go and look at my LinkedIn, I was trying to build an ed tech product. Like, those are the kinds of things where I think education is such an important factor for socioeconomic mobility. Yeah. And we need to rethink education. We need to rethink what skills are required. How can I be part of that journey in helping all of us figure this out together? And I think very deeply, I spent a lot of time reading and catching up on research around how is tech impacting society, right? Like things like, people are taking phones away from the classrooms and it's improving outcomes. Where do we use tech in the right way? Right. Is such an important question. We just say, hey, we need tech everywhere.
Exactly.
Only not true, right? Like, in which forum, in which form factor, in which way and for whom are we using this? For what benefit are we using this? There's an ex-McKinsey senior partner who's actually heading up a team at Google, which I think is wonderful, that's starting to think about technology in society. Right. And they're in DeepMind, they're building a team to think about post AGI, what the world looks like. But all of that, and I hope more and more companies are spending time building these kinds of teams, thinking about what is the impact of their technology beyond just revenue and profit, because I think some of these companies are bigger than countries at this point.
Yeah.
They have such a huge responsibility, and who's holding them accountable? If we, as the tech industry, take that mantle on saying, not only are we trying to optimize for profit, but we're also thinking about purpose. A lot of these AI labs are now public benefit corporations,
right?
Which means they do have that dual purpose of also thinking about what is beneficial, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go on a tangent for like 30 seconds and talk about something.
Yeah.
Over the last few days, I've been watching Twitter turn into a place where a lot of women's pictures are being modified by AI in a way that feels unhealthy.
Right.
As a woman who's keeping up with a lot of this on platforms, social media platforms, it's just disheartening to see that the big use of technology right now is editing women's pictures and putting them in clothes that they would not choose to be in.
Wow.
Right? I'm just
Yeah.
sitting with that sense of like,
Yeah.
I work on image editing models along with the rest of my research teams and my cross-functional partners. And I'm like, we try to take a very responsible approach at Adobe where we are trying to ensure that it's trained on licensed content. We're taking it to, its natural place of being responsible. But there are technologies out there that are like, the people who are scammers and thieves and people will adopt these technologies faster than the people who need to be responsible.
Right.
A thief will adopt it faster than a policeman would. Right?
Right.
Like that's just the nature of humanity and the institutions that we have in place. Then I think there's a responsibility as a technologist to ensure that the good guys have the technology, they're using it the right way. We build the technology, optimize it to be used by those people so that we're fighting some of these things that are happening that are not healthy for the rest of society. So I'm sitting deeply with that sense of like, how do I get to a place where we're focused on both purpose and profit together?
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. And yes, absolutely right. Like, I think technology, people are using it the wrong way with ethical stuff. And I know someone talked about this as well, that we need to be very intentional and careful. And I love how you said focus more on purpose, because there are purpose-driven entrepreneurs, but I don't see too much of it. It's still rare, the 1%. And I want to see more, make it more common now, right? Those purpose-driven leaders that, yes, I mean, I have to say this, but it's a world where it's a little bit more capitalist, like, a little money-minded, but at the same time, there are purpose-driven people, and I love how you kind of emphasize the purpose plus the profit. They can go hand in hand. I know that's a completely different conversation, but a lot of people think like, oh, if you're doing a purpose, you can't sell anything or has to be nonprofit, but no, that's not the reason. Mine is purpose plus profit, but I think people need it, right? It's
Yeah.
say that like I own this work, even though it's a purpose-driven thing, like people really need it and it's okay, right? So I think there's also limiting beliefs on that needs to be released as well. But I'm so excited for you. I know you're a founder, but you're a builder. You are just so multifaceted, and I know that you're going to build something amazing. I see a lot of potential in you, so kudos, and I'm just so excited. Let's get into the fun rapid fire round.
Okay.
Okay, so let me see what to ask you. Favorite travel destination?
It's a really good one. I love Mexico City. I just came back from 12 days in Mexico. Mexico City is one of my favorite cities to go to. It's accessible for me from California. I love the food there. I particularly stay in some of these neighborhoods that are a little, safe, but also like have proximity to the center of action. It's interesting to see the city grow and evolve. This is not my first time going there. It won't be my last time. So that's been really fun. And then the other one that's a little off the beaten path is I think Slovenia is very underrated. If anybody listens to me talk about travel, they will tell you that, I've probably mentioned to multiple people that I really like Slovenia. It's very beautiful. It's in the Adriatic coast. I think people go so much more to Italy and Croatia because of all these Game of Thrones thing. But
Yeah.
Slovenia is such an underkept, like a well-kept secret from the rest of the world, but an under-traveled destination. And it's beautiful. It's picturesque. The hikes are wonderful. Lake Bled is a personal favorite of mine. And if anybody is thinking about a European vacation for 2026, I hope Slovenia is on your list.
Yes, this is great. I've actually seen Slovenia on like TV and it looks pretty, but never whenever goes there. But I love how you talked about that. No, I need to check this out, both of them, Mexico City and Slovenia. So thank you so much. And yeah, I love to see photos and pictures of Mexico City. So that's awesome. And let's see what else. Something small that always makes you happy.
Yeah, so this is funny, but my husband and I are really into ice cream, and both of us don't take sugar as a result of like some of the genetic stuff that you might hear about in the South Asian populations. So we've discovered keto ice cream, and it has become such a go-to for us. Like almost 2-3 times a week, we get to eat ice cream after dinner, and it's such a joyous moment that we share. And another really small thing that we are doing now for almost 3.5 years, and we've really fallen in love with it, is at least twice a week we solve crosswords together. And it brings a lot of joy for me, particularly New York Times and New Yorker crosswords, and we really, really have fun. I don't get to read as much as I used to when I was younger, so it keeps up with vocabulary, current events. Like, it gives me a lot of pleasure doing crosswords with him.
Yeah. Wow, like yeah, I love how you just lit up when you had those small moments. That's how I am too. Like, because usually people will be like, yeah, like social media and this, but it's just those small things. Like, I've never tried keto ice cream, so that's amazing. I just love that. And crosswords, I used to do them all the time. I had a book childhood. Like, I think we get so used to this work that we never make time for hobbies, and that's something I love about you, that you just really make time for people for things that are more important to you, those small moments with your husband. And that's something I want to highlight on these calls, that please, whoever's listening, those small moments, those precious moments, don't take it for granted. And whenever you can, whether it's your kids or your husband, whoever that is, take the time to just kind of express gratitude, and do this, most important things together. Just do those happy small moments. And one more. Let's see. One song or artist you can't stop listening to right now.
Right now. So, two things. I will say that my favorite artist in the whole world is this band from India called 𝗀𝗲𝗵, AGAM, mostly because they combine two genres of music that I really love, which are Carnatic music and rock. They do Carnatic rock. Every time I'm in like a zone of working, like I turn on 𝗀𝗲𝗵 and like it runs in the background. I know the lyrics to most of their songs, so I can just sing along and like I'm focused on doing my work. It really gets me going. There's this other band that is not very well known called 𝗀𝗵𝗿𝗄, which is an Indo jazz band. Very similar. They're more instrumental, so it helps me again like not pay attention to what is going on, and I can work in parallel. But today in my household, my husband's learning music, so there's this Hindustani musician called 𝗍𝗶𝗀𝗵, and he's in his school. So we listen to a lot of abhangs these days, and pretty much that runs our household for runs in our household for 24/7 at this point. Like somebody who grew up singing Carnatic music and Indian classical music, like I obviously have an affinity towards all of that. So I'm sort of tagging along for the journey and having fun.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is great. Like, I'm also a Carnatic music singer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my mom learned Carnatic music, so I can kind of relate. I need to check out 𝗀𝗲𝗵 and all that. So I need to connect with you after this, by the way.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I think we have so much in common, and I also learned Carnatic music. Even though I was born and raised here, I just love how, I think both of our families really brought that culture into our life. That's very important, and I've been learning it since 5 years old. I still listen to it. It's on my playlist as well, any Bollywood. So I love how you really own your culture. Because usually when people I ask, they're like, hey, I listen to this, like rock, but you really own yourself. And you're like, you know what, I love this. And they're just great. Like, I just love your answers. So amazing. Well, thank you so
I'll
much for
just say
sharing.
one last thing, Reena, which is like, I think music is such an important part of therapy. I think
Right.
people underestimate the impact it can have. When I go through tough moments, you asked me earlier, how do you navigate ambiguity and things? Sometimes the inspiration comes from the most random piece of music that I listen to because there's a particular raga or something like that like evokes a certain emotion in me.
Exactly.
And that helps me cope with what is going on or think about problems differently. Like, what if I listen to something super joyous when I'm going through something really sad? It lights me up and it helps me reframe the situation positively. Like, those kinds of things really matter. It is so interesting to me how much music impacts my mood personally. And I
Yeah.
really use that as a tool. And I really wanted to say, like, the fact that we have such a gift is people from the South Asian population, and I'm sure every culture has their own music. You relate back to your families, your
Right.
your spaces, your ancestors. Like, it's such a deep connection for folks like me and you, I'm pretty sure. So
Yeah.
I would just say one piece of advice, like ignore the rest of the podcast. Just use music the way you need to like change your mood, uplift yourself, and like just focus on really important things in life. So
Yeah.
it's a really useful. I don't know what we'll do if we didn't have music in our lives.
Exactly. Exactly. Great point. Absolutely can resonate with everything you're saying. Music is my go-to. Like you said, any raga is just so soulful. It brings out the soul in me and like the feminine aspect of me. And even dance, I also learned Carnatic dance as well. I still love it to today. And whatever, yeah, like there's different dances and different things. I've also learned salsa and this and that, and music, dance, especially I want to highlight, and emphasize this for women.
Yeah.
I think we tend to forget, like we're just so grinding and hustling that we never make the time to listen to even a small music. Or, we think of we don't even think of it as a tool for therapy. We're just like going about our day and everything. So I love how you really just emphasize this right now. a nice, really good reminder that music is just it can just solve a lot of your problems and worries. Like, you don't even need to like think about it. Just feel into it, right? Slow down, feel into it, whatever you like, whatever music or whatever you like to do. There's so many tools out there, so amazing. Well, this conversation was just absolutely wonderful and grounding, expansive. So you've inspired me and so many people. So what stayed with me is that, as mentioned, that in an AI first world, our humanity becomes a differentiator, right? Yeah. And not something to outsource, but to really have those, to actually deepen it within ourselves. So your reflections are actually, they offer such an important reframe for leaders nowadays, the work that we do. So it's very valuable. So for everyone listening, I invite you to reflect on this question. So where might your lived experiences and perspective already be your greatest leadership advantage, right? These are your leadership strengths. But really think about that. So Vaish, thank you for your generosity, wisdom, and depth that you bring to this work. It's been a true joy having you on Voices of Impact. And to our listeners, the season is really about new beginnings because it's the new year, deeper conversations, and creating a community of leaders who care about, conscious growth. So I'll be sharing more of my personal reflections and behind the scenes. So if this conversation resonated, feel free to message me and Vaish as well on LinkedIn. She's a great mentor, and stay tuned for what's coming next inside the Voices of Impact community. So until next time, remember that the future isn't built by machines or AI. It's shaped by humans who lead with clarity, courage, and care.
Thanks, Veena.